An Exile's Son says, what is the best steps for re-entering the workforce after being terminated or discharged? Performance only, no ethics or policy violations, say with 6-month gap of unemployment since termination. I wouldn't draw attention to if you were fired with cause for performance issues. I would take the approach that you don't want to get into it with people, because I think once you start talking about that, it's like you just go down this abyss
Wow.
of, yeah, you appear as like, oh, we don't want to hire you. You're the type of person that has clear performance issues. They're going to paint you with that brush. So I would take the approach where you're not going to get into it with them.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to elaborate on that further, Abby.
Not much. I mean, that's what I was going to say as well, is it raises some alarm bells if you were to point it out. You don't necessarily want to, like we've mentioned before, you're not going to lie about it if it comes up, but you want to focus more on the positive and how you've grown and developed and prepared for this new role that you're interviewing for, or the job search that you're beginning. You've had a 6-month gap of unemployment. What have you done during those 6 months to prepare you for these next steps? If you were fired with cause for performance issues, you likely got some good feedback about what that was, what was lacking, what needed to be improved. And so you can really focus on those as your, things that you've worked on and that you're wanting to put into practice with this new role. You're not mentioning that you were fired for performance issues for those reasons, but just in your mind, those are things that you can highlight as, these are the things I've worked on in the last, in my time of unemployment, or these are the things that I've done to hone my skills or increase my training, or, whatever. But keep it positive. You don't need to bring it up.
I want to say that I agree with Abby on this, and that is the best sort of way to look at it. However, I want to offer an alternative sort of take on this, and that is that almost like a sort of underdog kind of attitude here. If you're fired for performance issues at the end of the day are still a matter of opinion. Like if you have a boss that's just out to lunch, they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they got some pretty damn strange ideas of how jobs should be performed. And then
or very unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. In their opinion, you have performance issues, simply because you didn't do it exactly the same way that they dictated when they dictated to you that you should do it in a way that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like, you get all kinds of stuff going on out there. So listen, it's quite plausible that you might have found yourself in that situation. And the problem is that if you are in a situation like this, where you have to apply for a job, and you can expect them to say, well, why did you leave your last job? Right? It's a question that's probably going to come up. The problem is, officially, your reason for termination was performance issues. You don't want to admit that, because then that sort of gives everyone the impression that you're a bad employee, when that could be completely untrue. So in that case, okay, now I'm not advocating that people lie about stuff, but here's possibly a way you could phrase it that might work for you. Is you could say, look, when I was originally hired, okay, it was for a specific role, and the way it was communicated to me that, it was for this role, this is what my duties would be, this is how it would work. But over time, it became apparent that my duties changed from that original agreement, and my job morphed into something completely different that did not speak to my talents or my interest. And for that reason, it did not work out, and I'm ready to do more. And that's how I would phrase it.
Yep.
Now, is that a lie? I would say, under the circumstances, I would be okay with saying that. It is quite a stretch, but given some of the nature of this, if you've been branded incorrectly as to having performance issues, I don't personally, for myself, I don't think it's unethical to spin it in that way under the circumstances.
I agree. And again, what we've mentioned before in this stream is that you are marketing yourself, you're selling yourself. So you've really got to put yourself in this light and this perspective that shows that you're the best fit for a position. And if we dwell on the fact that we were terminated with cause for performance problems, that's going to raise some concerns with the person who's doing the hiring process. It doesn't mean that they're not going to consider you anymore. It just means they're probably going to take a closer look at you than they would otherwise. Now, I would recommend a similar type of response to what Bill just said. It could also be something like, why did you leave your last job? It just wasn't a good fit anymore. Like that right there.
Yeah.
It's not a good fit. My performance wasn't measuring up to what they were expecting me. Maybe there were some other things going on. Maybe I didn't have a great relationship with my supervisor or my colleagues or coworkers. Maybe I just didn't like the work. Just saying that it just wasn't a good fit anymore. And I recognize that. And I'm glad to be moving on to this new experience. It can still acknowledge the situation without being too honest about what actually went down.
Yeah. And just remember, the deeper you get into explaining what happened, the worse it gets for you. The best thing would be to like what Abby just said, it's not a good fit. Oh, how delightfully vague. Like that's actually good, because the more detailed you get in your answer, the more you get into, well, this didn't work out and that didn't work out. And I didn't get along with this person. I didn't get along with that person. The deeper you go, the worse it is for yourself. So the best thing is to just not get into it at all. Just say, this is what happened.
Skim over it.
Story. Yeah, there we go. Next question.